and that property would have what type? What is the type of file names? Excuse me? String array, you said? Yeah, that's what it is. And by the way, if you didn't know, you can always look in your code, or you can go look at the properties of in Open File Dialog. Okay. Now, what's going to happen? One thing that you will notice is that there is a file name property, but there is no file names. Okay. Now, why would there not be a file names? What would be the logic for not providing that property here? Yes?
Maybe we can just list them by just, file name 1, comma, file name 2, so it would be redundant to have file names properties, because we can do that just using file names properties.
Well, not really, because file name is just a string, one string. So it only has one name in it, whereas file names has multiple. The thing is this, were you able to set file name according to this? Can you set? Yeah, you can, because that's what allows you to have the Open File Dialog come up and you specifying the name that you would want if you just hit enter. But file names, it doesn't really make sense to give you access to file names as something that you can set. See, they are properties that are not shown to you. Those are the properties that make no sense to be set, writable properties. For instance, if I want multi-select, yeah, I want to be able to change that so I can set it to true. That's why it's available here. These are properties that you can actually set. There are other properties, you don't see them because it makes no sense to set them. So file names, plural, it makes no sense. Why would I want to set multiple names? I might want to set one name to say when the file dialog comes up, I have a name already set. If I hit enter, that's the file I'm going to have. But what sense would it make to say I want IBM, Microsoft, and all of those? So you don't see it there, so how would you even know? Well, you would maybe take a look at the documentation, maybe you would take a look at, something like a ChatGPT, ask it, is there such a property? And also sometimes your own logic says, well, if I can select multiple files, and if there is a property named file name that gives me one file name, it would kind of make sense that, hey, maybe there is a file names property. And the way you look for that is that you can do something like this. You can go in your code, okay, and I'll have to change a few things in a second, but if I go in my code, something like this, now don't worry, there's already stuff in there, but it won't make sense, so don't just copy it. If I were to go here, for instance, and I could say, hey, give me the Open File Dialog, this was experimental stuff, so here's my Open File Dialog, I can type dot, and then now the compiler tells you there is a file name property, but there is also a file names property, okay? And I clicked on it, and now you can see right over there that file names only has a get. It doesn't have a set. That's why you don't see it in the list of properties when you're using the designer. Also, now when you say get, it says, I'm going to provide you with all the file names that the user may have selected when they click on the thing, and then if you want to know, well, what's the type of that, you can see that it says, oh, file name is a string array, okay? So you do know that now, if you click and select multiple files, you want to know where that information is. It's in the file dialog, but not on the file name, but on the file names. Now you say, what about file name though? How does that work? Well, file name is always the same, basically, as file names bracket 0. So if you only allow for one file to be picked, we saw that, hey, we could find the name by looking at file name, okay? But you could also probably found it by saying file names bracket 0. Now, on the other hand, if you actually select multiple files, then you have file name 0, file names 1, file names 2, which is all the individual file names. But file name, this one here, okay, would be, as it says here, containing the file names selected in the file dialog box, but it's really the first one, okay? All right, so now we've decided, which one am I here? That this would be our new input dialog file, dialog if you want, or our first window that shows up. What do you want to do once the user has selected multiple files? Conceptually, what do you want to do? We're not talking code here, just what we want to do. Let's give some others in the back of chat. Yes, go ahead.
Open a form with a chart for each file.
Yeah, that would be one nice way to do it, to say, okay, we are going to display each one of the files. And by the way, we did say we don't have a data grid view anymore. Okay, so that means that now in our project, besides this particular form, which is our main form, we would like to be able to display another type of form, but that's a type of form that would only display the chart. Okay, well, with a couple of other things. So what we're thinking of doing, and as I said, I was playing around with this stuff, but we would like to have maybe a form, call it chart display or whatever you want, that would be something like this, okay, what you're seeing on the screen right now. Okay? This would be a form that would display, and I haven't fixed that thing up yet, but conceptually, you want a form that would display the chart along with its volume, and we know how to do that, okay? And we also would like this form to have a start date and end date and a button, but now that button, we would like to call it a refresh button. We'll explain what that means. So, in my main form, I select my files, then in the same way that we displayed the data in project 1, the change that we have here is that we want to create a new form and display the data of each file in a separate form for each one of the files that was selected, okay? Now, we'll think a bit about the mechanics of that. How do we make that happen? What kind of information we want to send to the new form, okay? So, let's say now that we did open a new form for each one of the file name and we're displaying their stock with their volume. The idea is that this new form would be open and would have the entire list of candlesticks. And we'll see how does it get that information. And then it would display based on your start and end date. However, if after looking at it, you decided as the user that, I would like to not look at this data range, but I want to look at this data range, we would like to be able to redisplay, but without having to go reread the data. Because after all, once we've read the data once, we have all of our data. Do we agree? So we shouldn't have to say, oh, because I don't want to display this amount, but I want to display this amount, oh, let me go reread the data. You don't want to do that. Rereading is expensive. Right now, you're rereading it from your disk, but what if you were getting your data from